Before we descend into the shadows of Beirut and the cold calculation of revenge, if you want to uncover the operations the history books try to keep hidden, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Beirut, 1982. The city was a bruised jewel, glittering with broken glass and the flash of mortar fire. For 3 years, Eitan Halevi had ceased to exist. In his place stood Karl Vogel, a Swiss machinery importer with a penchant for high-stakes backgammon and a seemingly endless supply of industrial spare parts that militia leaders desperately needed. Eitan, or Karl, sat on the terrace of the St. George Hotel, the Mediterranean breeze carrying the scent of salt and cordite. He was waiting for a meet that would secure his place in the inner circle of the Red Brigade's local liaison office. But the air felt wrong. In the intelligence world, survival is often a matter of listening to the silence, and the silence around him was heavy. A waiter approached, placing a Turkish coffee on the table. Eitan didn't look up, but his peripheral vision caught the man's wrist. A tattoo. A small, black scorpion. It wasn't local ink. It was specific to a sub-faction he had been tracking, a group of 18 operatives known as the Syndicate, who acted as brokers between European radicals and Middle Eastern training camps. The waiter didn't leave. He leaned in, his voice a low rasp. "The Swiss machinery is broken, Herr Vogel. The blueprints are out." It was a code, but not one from Tel Aviv. It was a taunt. Eitan's heart hammered a single hard rhythm against his ribs. Blueprints. His dossier. Someone had sold him out. Not just his location, but his identity. The 18 men he had been tracking, the Syndicate, hadn't just discovered him. They had bought his life from a traitor. He didn't panic. Panic is for civilians. He reached into his pocket, gripping the small Beretta 70, the standard issue for field agents who needed reliability over firepower. "Keep the change," Eitan said in flawless German-accented French. He stood up, leaving the coffee steaming. As he turned, he saw them. 3 men at the lobby entrance, 2 more by the street. They weren't there to arrest him. They were there to make a public example. The Syndicate didn't just kill spies, they dismantled them. Eitan moved toward the kitchen service entrance. He knew the layout of the St. George better than the architects. He slipped through the swinging doors, grabbed a heavy iron skillet from a startled line cook, and kept moving. When the first gunman burst through the door, Eitan didn't shoot. The noise would draw the others. He swung the skillet with the force of a piston, connecting with the man's temple. The man dropped without a sound. Eitan stepped over him, moving into the alleyway. It was blocked. A black Mercedes idled there, engine purring. The back window rolled down, revealing the face of the man who would haunt him for the next 2 years. Qasim, the financier of the Syndicate. Qasim smiled, a cold, dead expression. "Goodbye, ghost," Qasim whispered. A muzzle flashed from the car. Eitan threw himself behind a dumpster as bullets chipped the masonry above his head. He returned fire, 2 precise shots shattering the Mercedes' rear windshield. The car screeched away, not willing to engage in a prolonged firefight in a militia-controlled zone. Eitan ran. He ran through the labyrinth of the Hamra district, ditching his jacket, his false passport, and his life as Karl Vogel. He made it to a safe house in the Christian sector, a damp basement smelling of mold and old paper. He radioed Tel Aviv on a burst transmitter. "Cover burned. The Syndicate knows. 18 hostiles. I am compromised." The reply came back 40 minutes later. It was short, brutal, and final. "Extract immediately. Mission aborted." Eitan stared at the device. Aborted. He had spent 3 years building this legend. He knew their faces. He knew their names. Qasim, the financier, the broker in Rome, the chemist in Paris. 18 men who fueled the terror machinery across 2 continents. If he left now, they would disappear. They would change names, faces, and operations. He typed a response, his fingers trembling with a rage he rarely allowed himself to feel. "Negative. I am the only one who knows them. I am going dark. Initiation of protocol. Erasure." He crushed the transmitter under his boot. There would be no extraction. Karl Vogel was dead. Eitan Halevi was a ghost. And the ghost was going hunting. He wasn't just an agent anymore. He was about to become a myth. They called him the Butcher, in the whispers of the intelligence community later. Not because he was messy, but because he carved the rot out of the system with surgical, terrifying precision. Haifa, 2 weeks later. Eitan didn't go to the Mossad headquarters in Tel Aviv. He couldn't risk the bureaucracy slowing him down. Instead, he met with the deputy director of operations, a man known simply as Giora, in a nondescript apartment overlooking the port. Giora looked tired. The dossier on the table was thick. "You're supposed to be in a debriefing, Eitan, not demanding a hit list." "It's not a hit list, Giora. It's a correction," Eitan said, staring out at the gray sea. "They bought my file. They know about the safe house in Brussels. They know about the logistics route in Cyprus. These 18 men aren't just terrorists. They are a walking intelligence breach. As long as they breathe, every operative in Europe is at risk." Giora lit a cigarette, the smoke curling around his weathered face. He knew Eitan was right. The syndicate was a unique threat, a hybrid of intelligence brokers and terror facilitators. They didn't plant the bombs. They introduced the bomber to the bomb maker and took a commission. "The Prime Minister won't authorize a squad," Giora said softly. "The diplomatic climate is fragile. We can't have a team running around Europe causing international incidents." "I don't need a team," Eitan replied. "I need resources. I need clean passports, untraceable funds, and access to the toys from the lab. I'll do the rest alone." "Alone? Against 18? Giora scoffed. "That's a suicide mission." "No, it's a liquidation. If I use a team, there are leaks. If I use a team, there are trails. If it's just me, I'm smoke. I'm an accident. I'm a heart attack. I'm a gas leak." Giora studied his agent. Eitan was a Kidon veteran, a man who could assemble a bomb in the dark and charm a diplomat's wife in 3 languages. But there was something different in his eyes now. The cold detachment was gone, replaced by a burning, focused intensity. "If you get caught," Giora warned, "we don't know you. You are a rogue element, a mental breakdown case." "I know the script," Eitan said. Giora opened the dossier. He pulled out a red pen and wrote a single word on the cover: "Sanctioned." "The list," Giora said, tapping the file. "We have confirmed IDs on 4 of them. The rest are shadows. You'll have to find them to kill them." "I know where to start," Eitan said, picking up the file. "Rome, the broker. He's the one who sold my file." "Eitan," Giora called out as he reached the door. "Don't make it messy." Eitan paused. "I'm not a soldier, Giora. I'm a janitor. I'm just cleaning up." He walked out into the humid night. The operation had a name now, authorized only in the deepest black budget ledgers: Operation Clean Slate. But in his mind, Eitan had a different name for it. He called it the Erasure. He spent the next 3 days in the archives, memorizing every detail of the 18 targets. He learned their habits, their vices, their allergies, and their fears. He wasn't planning to fight them. He was planning to become their fate. Target number 1, Lorenzo F. The broker. Location: Rome. Specialty: intelligence trafficking. Status: active. Time remaining: 48 hours. Rome is a city of ghosts, where ancient history sits heavy on the cobblestones. For Eitan, arriving under the guise of an Argentine art restorer named Matteo, it was just a hunting ground. Lorenzo, the broker, operated out of an antique shop near the Piazza Navona. It was the perfect cover. High-value items moved in and out, creating a legitimate paper trail for the vast sums of money he laundered for terror cells. Lorenzo was a man of taste, a glutton for fine wine and finer secrets. Eitan spent 2 days watching the shop. He noticed the pattern immediately. Every day at 1 p.m., Lorenzo walked to a small trattoria 2 blocks away. He sat at the same table, facing the door. He ordered the same veal. He was guarded by 2 men who sat at the bar, watching the reflection in the mirror. A direct assault was impossible. A sniper shot would cause a lockdown of the district. Eitan needed something quieter. He needed to get close. On the 3rd day, Eitan entered the trattoria an hour early. He went to the bathroom and accessed the ventilation panel he had loosened the night before during a break-in. He planted a small device, not a bomb, but a high-frequency emitter. At 1:15 p.m., Lorenzo sat down. Eitan was across the street, watching through a shop window. He activated the device. It emitted a sound inaudible to the human ear, but devastating to the inner ear equilibrium of anyone sitting directly beneath the vent. Lorenzo began to sway. He rubbed his temples. He looked nauseous. His bodyguards noticed and rushed over. They assumed a stroke or a heart attack. Chaos ensued. They helped him up, dragging him out of the restaurant toward their car. This was the choke point. Eaton stepped out of the shop, bumping into the frantic group on the sidewalk. "Mio Dio! Does he need a doctor?" Eaton shouted, playing the concerned bystander. "Back off!" One bodyguard shoved him. In that split second of contact, Eaton's hand moved faster than the eye could track. He held a modified signet ring with a microscopic needle. He brushed it against Lorenzo's exposed neck. It was a pinprick, nothing more. A mosquito bite. The toxin was a derivative of succinylcholine, fast-acting and metabolizing quickly into natural compounds. It mimicked complete respiratory failure. Eitan stumbled back, hands raised. "Scusi, scusi!" The bodyguards shoved Lorenzo into the car and sped off to the hospital. Eitan watched them go. By the time they reached the emergency room, Lorenzo would be dead. The autopsy would show heart failure brought on by stress. 1 down, 17 to go. But Lorenzo was just the middleman. Before he died, Eitan had intercepted his mail at the antique shop. A single letter, postmarked from Paris, contained a sequence of numbers, bank accounts, and a name: Le Chimiste, the chemist, the man who built the bombs that the syndicate sold. Eitan didn't celebrate. He went to the train station, wiped his fingerprints from the Matteo passport, and flushed it down a toilet. He boarded the night train to Paris. The butcher was moving north. Paris in the rain is romantic for tourists, but for spies, it's a gray hell. The dampness seeps into your bones, and the reflections on the wet pavement make counter-surveillance a nightmare. Target number 2, Michel B., the chemist. Michel was a former radical student who had turned his knowledge of chemical engineering into a lucrative career making detonators that couldn't be detected by airport scanners. He was paranoid, living in a fortress-like apartment in the 16th arrondissement. He never went out. He ordered food in. He had a private security detail that swept his building every hour. Eitan rented a maid's room across the courtyard. He set up a directional microphone, aiming it at Michel's window. For 3 days he heard nothing but static and the hum of a refrigerator. Michel was disciplined, but everyone has a weakness. Michel's was vanity. He considered himself an intellectual superior. He monitored the obituaries of his rivals. Eitan decided to use a Trojan horse, not digital, but physical. He forged a package, a rare first-edition book on anarchist philosophy that Michel had been bidding on through proxies. Eitan laced the pages of the book not with poison, that was too risky for a man who wore gloves, but with a radioactive isotope dust, polonium-210, sourced from the specialized labs back home. It wasn't enough to kill instantly, but handled over time, it was a death sentence. However, Eitan needed it to be faster. He changed tactics. The book was the lure, but the delivery was the weapon. He intercepted the regular courier service Michel used. Eitan, dressed in the uniform of the La Poste, walked up to the security intercom. "Package for Monsieur Michel. Signature required." "Leave it," the voice crackled. "I cannot. It is insured for 50,000 francs. Protocol." The door buzzed. Eitan walked up the stairs. 2 guards met him at the apartment door. They scanned the package with a metal detector. Clean. They checked Eitan for weapons. Clean. They took the package inside. Eitan turned to leave, but he paused on the landing. He pulled a small remote from his pocket. The package wasn't just a book. The binding contained a high-pressure glass vial of a binary gas. It wasn't triggered by a timer, but by a specific radio frequency. He waited until he heard the distinct sound of the door bolting shut. He walked down 1 flight of stairs and pressed the button. A muffled thump echoed from above. It sounded like a heavy book falling off a table. Inside, the gas released instantly, filling the small foyer where the guards and Michel were inspecting the package. It was a nerve agent, paralyzing the diaphragm instantly. They would suffocate in silence, fully conscious but unable to move. Eitan walked out of the building, tipping his cap to the concierge. "Have a good day, madame." As he walked down the boulevard, he checked his list. 2 names crossed out. But the files in Michelle's apartment, which he couldn't retrieve, were a loss. He had to rely on the next link in the chain. Before the gas took him, Michelle had made a phone call. Eitan had recorded it. It was to a number in Munich, a number belonging to the man who organized the logistics for the 1972 Olympic massacre, a man who was supposed to be dead. Target number 3 was a ghost from the past. And Eitan was about to find out that the syndicate was older and deeper than anyone in Tel Aviv realized. Munich. The city held bad memories for Mossad. The tragedy of '72 hung over every operation there. But Eitan wasn't there for memories. He was there for the architect. Target number 3, Hans G., a German national with ties to the Baader-Meinhof gang, now working as a logistics consultant for Middle Eastern groups. Hans operated out of a modernist glass house in the Bavarian countryside. It was a statement. I have nothing to hide. But the glass was bulletproof, and the grounds were patrolled by Dobermans. Eitan realized that infiltrating the house was impossible without a small army. He had to draw Hans out. But Hans was careful. He only left the compound for one thing, his weekly visit to a private sanatorium where his ailing mother lived. It was a touch of humanity in a monster, and Eitan would exploit it ruthlessly. Eitan infiltrated the sanatorium staff, posing as a maintenance worker. He didn't target the mother. That crossed a line even for the butcher. Instead, he targeted the routine. He accessed the garage where Hans's armored limousine waited during the visits. The car was a tank. Bombing it would require too much explosive, creating a scene that the German police couldn't ignore. Eitan needed an accident. He worked on the car's braking system. He didn't cut the lines. That was amateur hour. He injected a corrosive acid into the master cylinder seals. It would hold for normal driving, but under sudden hard pressure, like an emergency stop on the Autobahn, the seals would fail catastrophically. Then he rigged the environment. On the day of the visit, Eitan drove a beat-up truck onto the Autobahn route Hans took back to the compound. He waited in a lay-by. As the limousine approached, speeding in the fast lane, Eitan pulled out, blocking the lane, forcing a sudden, violent braking maneuver. He watched in the rear-view mirror. The limousine's brake lights flared red, then a puff of smoke as the fluid sprayed onto hot calipers. The car didn't slow down. It swerved, the driver losing control as the pedal went to the floor. The heavy armored vehicle plowed through the guardrail at 160 kilometers per hour, launching into the valley below. Eitan didn't stop. He drove to the next exit, abandoned the truck, and switched to a rental car. The news reports that evening called it a tragic mechanical failure. The German authorities suspected nothing foul. 3 down. But among the wreckage, investigators found a briefcase. A corrupt contact in the German police, a scion, helper, photographed the contents before they were logged. He passed the film to Eitan in a crowded beer hall. The photos showed a manifest, a shipment of weapons heading to South America, and a list of names of the crew handling it. Targets 4, 5, and 6. The syndicate was moving its operations to Brazil. The jungle would be harder to clean than the streets of Europe. Rio de Janeiro. The heat was different here, heavy, wet, and smelling of rotting vegetation and diesel. Eitan arrived during Carnival. The city was a pulsing, chaotic organism of drums and dancing. It was the perfect cover for a hit, and the perfect hiding place for 3 terrorists. Targets 4, 5, and 6. The logistics cell. 3 brothers, Lebanese nationals, who ran a shipping company in the port of Santos, but lived in a fortified compound in the lush hills of Santa Teresa. They were responsible for shipping the plastic explosives that had blown Eitan's cover in Beirut. They were the ones who moved the physical tools of terror. Eitan knew he couldn't get them all at once if he attacked the compound. They would scatter. He needed to get them together. He forged a digital footprint, a fake identity as a buyer for a rebel group in Colombia, looking for a massive shipment. He used the codes he had stolen from the broker in Rome. He set up a meeting in a private VIP box at the Sambadrome during the height of the parade. The noise would be deafening. The crowd would be a million witnesses who saw nothing. Eitan arrived early. He swept the box for bugs. Clean. He prepared the gift, a bottle of rare cachaça, sealed. The brothers arrived flanked by armed guards. They were arrogant, flashy, wearing silk shirts and gold chains. They laughed, thinking they were untouchable in their fiefdom. "Mr. Vogel?" the eldest brother said, using Eitan's old cover name. They knew. It was a trap. They hadn't come to sell. They had come to finish the job started in Beirut. Eitan smiled, his pulse steady. "Vogel is dead. I am the one who buried him." The guards drew their weapons, but Eitan didn't reach for a gun. He reached for the light switch. He killed the lights in the box. At the same moment, the massive fireworks display for the finale of the parade began outside. Boom, boom, boom. The explosions masked the sound of his silenced micro-Uzi, which he had taped under the table. In the strobing light of the fireworks, Eitan was a blur. He didn't aim. He pointed. Muscle memory took over. 3 bursts. 3 headshots. The brothers slumped over the table. The guards fired blindly in the dark, shattering the mirrors. Eitan rolled under the buffet table, grabbing the ankles of the nearest guard and pulling him down, a knife to the throat. Quiet. He threw a flashbang grenade, stolen from a Brazilian armory, into the center of the room. The blinding light disoriented the remaining guards. Eitan moved through the smoke like a wraith, neutralizing them with efficient, brutal Krav Maga strikes. He stood over the bodies of the 3 brothers. He took the manifest from the eldest's pocket. It contained coordinates, not for a shipment, but for a meeting place. The gathering. The syndicate was planning a summit, a meeting of the remaining leadership. Eitan slipped out of the box, blending into the dancing crowds of the Sambadrome. He was covered in sweat and specks of blood that looked like confetti in the neon lights. 6 down, 12 to go, but the next phase wouldn't be a hunt. It would be a war. The summit was taking place in a location no intelligence agency could officially touch. A diplomatic yacht in international waters off the coast of Cyprus. Cyprus, the island of spies. It sat like an aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean, listening to the Middle East. Eitan sat on a cliff overlooking the harbor of Limassol. Through his high-powered optics, he saw it. The Poseidon, a 150-foot mega-yacht registered in Panama, owned by a shell company linked to the Libyan government. On board were targets 7 through 12, 6 mid-level commanders of the syndicate. They were there to elect a new financier to replace the one Eitan had killed, and to restructure their network after the losses in Europe and Brazil. This was the hardest tactical problem yet. If he boarded, he'd be outnumbered 20 to 1. If he sank it, he risked killing innocent crew members, which violated the code he lived by. He had to be surgical on a floating fortress. He needed a team. But he had promised Giora he would work alone. Rules are for people who want to live, Eitan muttered. He went to the local marina and rented a diving rig. He wasn't going to board the yacht. He was going to manipulate it. That night, under the cover of a moonless sky, Eitan swam 2 miles out to the Poseidon. He used a rebreather to avoid surface bubbles. He reached the hull and attached a device to the rudder assembly. It wasn't an explosive. It was a jamming pod that targeted the yacht's navigation and communication frequencies. Then he climbed the anchor chain. He moved across the deck like a shadow. He bypassed the sentries by timing his movements with the rotation of the radar array. He made his way to the ventilation intake for the staterooms. He dropped a canister into the intake. It contained a potent sleeping gas. Within 10 minutes, the yacht was drifting, silent. Eitan donned a gas mask and entered the main cabin. There they were. 6 men slumped over maps and piles of cash. The men who had ordered the bombing of a school bus in Galilee. The men who had burned his cover. Eitan didn't use a gun. He injected each one with a lethal dose of potassium chloride. It stopped the heart instantly. It was clean, clinical. He gathered their intel, laptops, ledgers, codes. This was the treasure trove. But as he turned to leave, the door to the captain's quarters opened. The captain wasn't asleep. The ventilation system hadn't reached the bridge. The captain held a flare gun. He fired. The flare hit Eitan in the chest, bouncing off his Kevlar vest but searing his skin. The blinding red light illuminated the cabin. Eitan tackled the captain, knocking him unconscious. But the flare had ignited the curtains. The fire spread instantly, fueled by the spilled alcohol on the table. Eitan had to move. He grabbed the intel and ran for the deck. The fire alarm wailed. The crew below decks were waking up, coughing, fighting the smoke. He dove off the side of the yacht into the black water just as the fuel tanks, overheated by the fire spreading to the engine room, ignited. The Poseidon didn't explode in a movie fireball, but a deep structural crump broke its back. It began to list. Eitan watched from the water, treading in the cold dark. The 6 targets were dead. The crew would abandon ship. He saw the life rafts deploying. He had saved the innocent, but the guilty were gone. 12 down, 6 remaining. But as he swam back to shore, dragging the waterproof bag of intel, he realized something terrifying. The ledgers he had stolen contained a list of payments to a Mossad bank account. The traitor wasn't just an informant. The traitor was inside the agency. Someone high up. Someone who knew exactly where Eitan was right now. He wasn't the hunter anymore. He was the prey. Chapter 8. The Betrayal. Within, Eitan didn't return to Israel. He couldn't trust Giora. He couldn't trust the safe houses. He went to ground in Athens, living in a cheap hostel used by refugees. He analyzed the stolen ledgers. The payments were traced to an account managed by a shell company called Blue Horizon. Eitan recognized the name. It was a front used by the Mossad's Internal Security Division, the unit responsible for hunting moles. The irony was sickening. The unit hunting moles was run by the mole. The head of that unit was a man named Avram, a hero of the 1967 war, a legend. And now, apparently, the man who had sold Eitan to the syndicate. Why? Money? Ideology? Blackmail? Eitan had to flush him out. But to get to a man like Avram, you didn't use a gun. You used the truth. Eitan crafted a message. He sent it to the secure telex line in Tel Aviv using a high-level emergency code he shouldn't have possessed. I have the Poseidon ledgers. I know about Blue Horizon. Meet me in Vienna. Café Central. 48 hours. Come alone or the ledgers go to the New York Times. It was a bluff. Eitan would never betray the agency to the press. But Avram didn't know that. Vienna, the city of spies and cakes. Eitan sat in the Café Central, under the vaulted ceiling. He wasn't at a table. He was in the kitchen, dressed as a dishwasher. He had cameras rigged at the table he had specified. Avram arrived. He didn't come alone. He brought a cleanup crew, 3 Kaidan assassins, targets 13, 14, and 15. Eitan realized with horror that the syndicate wasn't just an external terror group. It had recruited from within. These assassins were rogue agents, loyal to Avram, moonlighting as terrorists for profit. The betrayal was total. Eitan watched on a small monitor in the kitchen. Avram sat down, checking his watch. The 3 assassins took positions around the cafe. Eitan activated the fire suppression system. Halon gas flooded the main dining hall. Panic, patrons screamed. In the confusion, Eitan emerged from the kitchen wearing a gas mask. He moved through the white fog. He found the first assassin by the door. A swift baton strike to the knee, followed by a sedative injection. He found the second by the window. This one drew a knife. They fought in the swirling mist, blades flashing. Eitan took a slash to his forearm, but managed to turn the assassin's knife against him. The third assassin panicked and started firing blindly. Eitan flanked him and neutralized him with 2 shots to the chest, 15 down. He walked up to Avram, who was coughing on the floor, trying to reach for his gun. Eitan kicked it away. He dragged Avram out the back door into the alley. He ripped the mask off. "Why?" Eitan asked. Avram laughed, blood on his teeth. "There is no victory, Eitan, only business. The war never ends. We just manage the accounts. The syndicate. It was just a way to fund operations the Prime Minister wouldn't authorize." "You sold my life for a budget line?" Eitan asked, his voice breaking. "You are an asset. Assets are expendable." Eitan raised his gun. "Protocol erasure." "You can't kill me," Avram sneered. "I am the state." "No," Eitan said. "You're a traitor." He pulled the trigger. 16 down, but Avram's phone rang. Eitan picked it up. A voice spoke. A woman's voice. Cold. Precise. "Is it done, Avram? Is the butcher dead?" Aitan froze. He knew that voice. It was Sarah, his handler, the only person he had ever trusted, the woman he loved. She was target number 17, and she was waiting for him in the one place he thought was safe. Chapter 9. The heart of the matter. The realization broke something inside Aitan. The physical wounds, the burn on his chest, the slash on his arm, were nothing compared to this. Sarah, the woman who had debriefed him after Beirut, the woman who had held him when the nightmares came. She was part of it. She was the one who kept him on the leash. He tracked the call. It originated from a safe house in the Swiss Alps, a chalet used for cooling off agents. Aitan drove through the night. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He was fueled by a cold, black sun of hatred. He arrived at the chalet at dawn. The snow was pristine, white and silent. He walked up the driveway, his gun at his side. He didn't bother with stealth. He wanted her to see him coming. Sarah stood on the balcony wrapped in a blanket. She held a cup of tea. She didn't look surprised. "I knew you'd come," she said, her voice carrying over the crisp air. 18, Aitan said, stopping at the foot of the stairs. "Who is the 18th? I count 17 dead." "The 18th isn't a person, Aitan," Sarah said, looking down at him with sad eyes. "It's the system, the network. You can kill the men, but you can't kill the need for them. You sold me. I saved you," she argued. "Beirut was a setup to bring you in, to recruit you for this, to clean house. Avram, he had gone rogue. We couldn't touch him officially. We needed a butcher. We needed someone who had nothing left to lose. So I took everything from you." Aitan stared at her. "You burned my cover, to turn me into a weapon against your own rogue agents?" "Yes, and you performed perfectly." "And the others? The terrorists? Real targets. But Avram was the prize, and now he's gone. The mission is over, Aitan. Come inside, it's cold." She extended a hand. For a moment Aitan hesitated. He was tired. So tired. He wanted to believe her. But then he saw it, the reflection in the sliding glass door behind her. A shadow moving. Target number 18. It wasn't a system. It was a man. A man holding a sniper rifle, aiming at Aitan's back from the tree line. Sarah wasn't welcoming him home. She was the bait for the final trap. Aitan dropped to the snow just as the crack of the rifle echoed through the valley. The bullet missed his head by inches. He rolled, firing at the balcony. Sarah screamed and ducked. Aitan scrambled toward the tree line, hunting the sniper. Target 18, the cleaner. The man sent to tidy up the loose ends, and Aitan was the biggest loose end of all. They played cat and mouse in the winter forest. The sniper was good. He moved fast, but Aitan was the ghost. He circled back, climbing a ridge. He spotted the sniper's breath condensing in the cold air. Aitan took the shot. One round. Clean. The sniper fell from his perch. 18. Down. Aitan walked back to the chalet. Sarah was packing a bag, frantically trying to leave. She froze when he entered the room. "Aitan, please," she begged. "I had no choice. They would have killed me too." Aitan looked at her. He looked at the woman he loved, and he realized that she was already dead. The woman he knew didn't exist. She was just another cover. "You're not on the list, Sarah," Aitan said quietly. She let out a breath of relief. "Thank God, we can—" "But you're not innocent," he finished. He didn't kill her. That would be too easy. Instead, he handcuffed her to the radiator. He picked up the phone and dialed the number for the Swiss Federal Police. "There is a woman at this address," he said. "She has evidence regarding the assassination of a German national in Munich and a bombing in Rio. She wants to confess." He hung up. He left the chalet, walking out into the snow. The sirens were already wailing in the distance. Chapter 10. The Last Ghost. Tel Aviv. 1 year later. Giora sat in his office. A package had arrived that morning. No return address. Inside was a single item. A backgammon die. Carl Vogel's lucky die. And a note. "The slate is clean. Don't look for me." Giora smiled. He put the die in his desk drawer next to 18 closed files. Aitan Halevi was never seen again. Some say he moved to New Zealand and became a sheep farmer. Others say he went to America and opened a bookstore. But in the training halls of the academy, they still whisper his story. The story of the agent who didn't just survive the burn, he became the fire. The Mossad butcher, the man who erased 18 names and then erased himself.